I don't think we should take anything that President Putin says seriously, right? He said he wasn't going to invade your country, and we're nearly 4 years into the war. He's trying to be provocative, right? He's trying to scare Europe. We see this happening over and over again. Right as Europe is about to make a serious decision on weapons, he threatens to use nuclear weapons. President Trump, at the beginning, was pretty skeptical of Volodymyr Zelensky, to put it nicely, and of Ukraine. But guess what? Now we see a 21-point increase in public opinion. It's more than 70% of Republicans support aid to Ukraine, military aid to Ukraine. And we see MAGA Republicans are more likely to support Ukraine than traditional Republicans. This is a massive change. From a political perspective, he has egg on his face, and that means that he looks very weak. He said, I will solve the war in 24 hours, then 3 days, and it's gone on and on and on. And he has nothing to show for himself. And he's weak domestically in the United States right now. So he needs a real foreign policy win. That Ukraine is not what you think it is. It is one of the most fascinating countries on earth, and I can't get enough of it.
Melinda, thank you so much for joining us to the studio, for coming here offline in Kyiv. It's my pleasure.
It's great to be with you, Natalie.
Melinda, before we're going to go to my questions about the huge, big policy, I want to ask about your own experience in Ukraine. As you mentioned before, it's your 11th time in Ukraine since the
full-scale war.
Full-scale war. Okay. Where have you been during this period, and do you have the most favorite city in Ukraine?
My favorite city is Kyiv. It will always be Kyiv. I moved to Kyiv in 2007 to teach English, and I was going to teach in Dnepropetrovsk when it was still Dnepropetrovsk. I went out to Dnepropetrovsk in January. I grew up in Alaska and thought I was ready for winter in Ukraine. I was not ready for winter in Ukraine, and I learned how to become a teacher. I was a freelance writer, and then they sent me back to Kyiv. And I planned to be here for 6 months. I fell in love with the country. I stayed for another year, and ever since then, my career has been focused on Ukraine. So since the full-scale war started, I come here as often as I can, and it's very difficult to get here without airplanes, obviously, so it takes a bit of time. But I've been in Kharkiv, I've been in Izum, I've been in Dnipro, I've been in Odessa, I've been out to Zaporizhia, I've been to the front at Orikhiv. I went and finally started studying Ukrainian at Ukrainian Catholic University last summer. I've been out to Uzhgorod, I've been to your hometown of Mukachevo, so I've been all over the place. I love this country, and my big message to foreigners is that Ukraine is not what you think it is. It is one of the most fascinating countries on earth, and I can't get enough of it.
Oh my God. Thank you. I think that's the end of the interview. That was the best. No, okay. Yeah, you mentioned Izum and Kharkiv. What was the most shocking scenes you saw there?
So I went to Kharkiv when it was relatively safe. I live in Washington, D.C., and I work for Razom for Ukraine. And we were advocating that the Biden administration finally allow the Ukrainians to shoot into Russia. And they did that. They made that policy decision. And I went about 5 months after that change. And it was really gratifying, Natalie, to talk to taxi cab drivers and normal people and for them to say everything changed. When President Biden made that decision, we went from living in the shelters back to our apartments. Our lives are completely different because of one man's decision. Thank you very much. But the moment that I will always remember for as long as I live was going to a small village outside of Izum. And it was an ordinary school, you know that blue paint that you see in every elementary school in Ukraine. And I walked up to the theater and it looked like an ordinary theater, but there were textbooks from the floor to the ceiling and they were tied up. And I said, what's going on here? And they were a mix of Russian and Ukrainian textbooks. And my tour guide said this little village had been occupied by the Russians and they were getting ready to burn all of the textbooks, but the Ukrainians managed to liberate this town and save the textbooks. And it's one thing to say that Russia wants to destroy Ukraine, and that's very abstract. I saw it for my own eyes. They don't want Ukrainian children to learn. They want to strangle this country. They don't want you guys to survive. They don't want you to speak either Russian or Ukrainian. And this is one of the ways that they're doing it, is by preventing people from learning.
3 days ago, or even 2 days ago, Russian dictator said that he not planning to fight Europe. And he said, I'm quoting, that I've said this many times, but if Europe suddenly wants to start a war, we are ready right now. How do you see this?
So I don't think we should take anything that President Putin says seriously, right? He said he wasn't going to invade your country, and we're nearly 4 years into the war. He's trying to be provocative, right? He's trying to scare Europe. We see this happening over and over again. Right as Europe is about to make a serious decision on weapons, he threatens to use nuclear weapons. And the Germans fall for it every time. It's so frustrating. You can map it out.
Yeah, absolutely. But how do you see the reaction of European countries, NATO countries, when Russia is invading their airspace? I mean, recently, since September, I guess, it's happening every week, I guess, in Poland, in Norway, in Denmark, in Germany.
So I think Europe is still asleep. We've seen a massive change in policy in Germany, but it's not fast enough. And right now, the big decision point is on the frozen Russian assets. We know that a decision has to be made this month. All eyes are on the Belgians to see if they have the courage to do this. And they're very afraid. They're very afraid of Russian retaliation. So I think this is probably a message aimed at scaring the Belgians and scaring all of Europe. But in general, the Europeans are still asleep, and they don't realize that if they don't step up, the U.S. is not a reliable partner anymore. They have to step up if they want to stop the war.
Why Belgium is so scared about use frozen Russian assets? Because of other investors going to see that and going to be scared? What is the main message behind it? I mean, main reason, I'm sorry.
A majority of the assets are held in Belgium, so they're afraid that if they stick their neck out, that they will face the most serious consequences.
So Russians going to sue them or what?
Well, they would throw Belgian companies out. They would harass their ambassadors. There's all sorts of nasty tricks that they could resort to.
Yeah, and regarding the recent visit of American delegation to Moscow, you know, I think that they were, as somebody of journalists said, they were not treating as a negotiator, but definitely like a tourist, because they were walking on the Red Square, they were, visiting Michelin restaurants. And at the end of the day, there was all the headlines of Ukrainian and international media saying no result of Witkov and Kushner visiting Moscow. There was no result after this meeting, no final. Why people are still believing, even those who are in a policy, have a great education, have a best access, much more than I do as a journalist, and still they fall in this trap that you can negotiate with a person, with Putin, who are actually do not accept the idea of existing Ukraine at all?
Right. No, it's a great question. So I think you and I could have written the headline. They didn't even have to go to Moscow, right? We knew the outcome. So to be serious, though, it's good that President Trump is trying. Like, let's state that from the beginning. I don't think he's going to get anywhere, but I'm glad he tried. So he spent 6 months trying to get some kind of peace deal. He went to my home state of Alaska, and he did this huge dog and pony show. But from a political perspective, he has egg on his face, and that means that he looks very weak. He said, I will solve the war in 24 hours, then 3 days, and it's gone on and on and on. And he has nothing to show for himself. And he's weak domestically in the United States right now. So he needs a real foreign policy win. And the other foreign policy victories that he has are not real. They're not sticking. And he knows he's also a big giant narcissist, and he wants a Nobel Peace Prize. We know that. And Ukraine is probably, if he could bring a genuine peace here, would he be worthy of that? Absolutely. I think everyone would say, give it to him. But you're right. There's a fundamental problem. How can you get Vladimir Putin to come to the table when he's unwilling to compromise? And they haven't answered that question. And we thought we saw President Trump changing and starting to harden and understand as the campaign this summer, the bombing campaign intensified, and we saw more horrific casualties. And we saw Melania Trump saying, hey, sweetie, Vladimir Putin is bombing children again. We start to see him harden. We saw sanctions, and it looked like he was moving in the right direction. And now he's moved back to a position of trying to get a deal.
Yeah. When we are talking today with you, it's the second day when we lost another Ukrainian city of Pokrovsk. Do you think that it's going to affect somehow the peace negotiations, or we don't have to stick on that?
So Pokrovsk is a victory for Putin. He's going to make a big deal out of it. But the Ukrainians had already lost the city from a strategic perspective before. It's not a big deal. So the important message, and I think that the message that's been lost in the headlines, is that the fortress cities in the Donbass are the important ones to hold on to. And Ukraine needs those cities. So they've been reinforced for the last 11 years. And look, it's terrible that the Ukrainians lost the city, but it's not the end of the world. And the part of the problem with this original peace plan, the 28-point peace plan, was that it asked Ukraine to give up 12% of the territory in Luhansk and Donetsk Oblast that it currently held. And that territory is crucial to keeping Ukraine as an independent state. Yes. Because it's so heavily reinforced. And that's not a point that I saw very many people make very clearly.
Absolutely. Melinda, about 2026, a lot of Ukrainian experts saying that if we are not going to make any deal with Russians by the February 2026, then the war will drag on for more years ahead. Do you agree with that statement? Do you see any signs, at least, that next year will be hard for Ukraine and for the world?
So this war is already too hard for Ukraine, right? Like, let's be honest about that. We're in Kiev. It's December. It's cold. It's dark. There's blackouts. There's brownouts. It's hard to live here. I mean, thank God we have power and heat and we're warm here, but this is not a great way to live. And one thing I'm really concerned about is the future of Ukraine's children. Not only have they had losses in education, and it means a loss in overall lifetime earnings because of COVID, but then you have another 4 years of war. And that's a subject that I think doesn't get enough attention. But on the big picture, the war is going to continue for another 12 to 18 months. That's the best military prediction that experts I know think. It depends. There's a lot of contingencies. It depends on the American ability to continue to sell weapons to the Europeans. And so far, so good. President Trump has threatened. It depends on our ability to continue to allow you guys to use our intelligence. It's super important. It very much depends on Europe's ability to maintain salaries and keep the state afloat, right? That's a big issue. And you guys are going to have major financial problems next year. That's something that I'm really worried about. But there will be an end to the war. At a certain point, we're going to run out of Ukrainians. We're going to run out of munitions as well.
Yes. How can we deal with that financial problems or with the help of the world?
So everyone loves to obsess about Ukrainian fatigue. I don't think it's true. So I see the opposite in America. Let me give you a different perspective. Yeah. So for the last 2 years, my team and I in Washington, D.C. have been trying to build support for Ukraine. And it's been hard going. It's been really hard going. And President Trump at the beginning was pretty skeptical of Volodymyr Zelensky, to put it nicely, and of Ukraine. But guess what? Now we see a 21-point increase in public opinion. It's more than 70% of Republicans support aid to Ukraine, military aid to Ukraine. And we see MAGA Republicans are more likely to support Ukraine than traditional Republicans. Yes. This is a massive change, right? So that amount of change in public support enables President Trump to move politically. If he wants to, he can wake up tomorrow and he could authorize a huge weapons package. He could do magnificent things if he wanted to. He could end this war. He has the ability to do that. He could enforce sanctions. He could turn up the pressure on the sanctions. He could insist that we do something with the frozen assets. He has the ability to end this war.
Yes. And speaking about that, how with a nice approach to a person, you can change the attitude of this person. I would like you to tell us the story about Speaker Mike Johnson. Can you share the whole story behind it? Because I've heard it, our viewers didn't, so I would like to repeat it again.
Sure, Natalie. So at the end of 23, Ukraine was very, very shell hungry. You guys didn't have enough shells, and the situation was very bleak and very dark. And you needed more American shells in order to continue the war. And House Speaker Mike Johnson was a decision maker, and he wouldn't allow, it's called a supplemental, it's additional money. It was $62 billion. He wouldn't allow this bill to come to the House floor. And many people worked on this. I just want to be clear. It wasn't just me or just my team. Hundreds of people worked on this collectively. But there were a lot of interesting innovations. So normally when you want to pass a bill and you lobby in America, you go see people and you say, hi, it's me. You explain the bill. You might have a lot of phone calls. Like there's certain ways of doing lobbying, sophisticated, normal ways of doing lobbying. None of that worked. And month after month, October, November, December, the shell hunger kept increasing. The pressure kept increasing. And we didn't know what to do. So then we had to get smart. I got a phone call. I didn't tell you this part of the story. And the person on the phone said, are you Melinda Haring? And I said, yes, of course. And they said, meet me at a cafe on Monday. I want to tell you about how we can turn things around. The man on the phone call was a Kiev entrepreneur named Lutsenko. He's 6'9". He's enormous. He played basketball at Louisiana State University. And Louisiana is a big part of the story. So America's a big country. We have 50 states. Louisiana is the one that looks like an L down in the south. And there's a reason why it's really politically important. It is the home state of House Speaker Mike Johnson, who was the decision maker. It's also the home state of the number 2 in the House, Steve Scalise. So we knew that we had to be in Louisiana. And when I pick up my phone and call Louisiana and they see my number is a DC number, no one would take my calls. No one wanted to talk to me. So Ramon said, I'm in. I'm a sweetheart of Louisiana. They love basketball there. So he put on his jersey and we did basketball camps in Louisiana. We went to 3 different cities and he started to talk about Ukraine in a way that wasn't political. So it was about meeting people. I'm Ukrainian. Here's what's going on in my country. It wasn't threatening. So that was the first thing we did. Then we got a phone call from someone else. It said, you know what? Mike Johnson is a devout Christian. He's an evangelical Christian. And his favorite Bible verse, this is very American, but his favorite Bible verse is Esther 4:14. And this Bible verse says that Esther was chosen for a time, a special time, to go and speak out. And Mike Johnson believes that he was chosen by God for this special time. So Razom for Ukraine took out a billboard, and it's a big sign, and we put it across the street from Mike Johnson's house in his church. And it said, Mr. Speaker, for such time as this. And we took a picture of a destroyed Baptist church in Berdyansk, Ukraine, and he saw it, and his team saw it. And in the process, another friend, another Razom board member, an amazing man who's American, he lives here. His name is Stephen Moore. He runs Ukraine Freedom Project. He collected all the stories of the persecution of Christians. Russia is persecuting Christians in occupied Ukraine. And he collected these stories of pastors, of torture, like horrific stuff. And he was able to give us those messages, and he started working the Hill. We started working the Hill. And Mike Johnson cares about Christians. He didn't know anything about this. So the issue of Christians was key to changing his heart. And another wonderful Ukrainian enters the story. Pavel Ungarian, he's a former member of the Ukrainian Rada, and he's an evangelical Christian, an organizer from Odessa, came to Washington and prayed with Mike Johnson 6 times. And he told him the stories of Christian persecution. He met Mrs. Johnson at the State of the Union, and he told her, this is what's happening in my country. He showed her pictures of pastors and priests, and she started crying, and she said, you have to come see Mike tomorrow. So the next day, Pavel went and met with Mike, and he started explaining to him what was going on, and it changed his heart. So the day that Mike Johnson decided, yes, let's do this, and President Trump didn't want it to go forward, right? That was the political pressure, and Mike thought he was going to lose his job. They brought in another Christian from Odessa, and he's the most gentle human I've ever met. His name is Sergei Hadarzi, and he just lost his wife and his little son in a missile strike. And he couldn't speak. He was so upset, but you could see the pain in his eyes, and they prayed with Mike Johnson, and that changed his heart. He also saw the intelligence assessments, and he knew that if he didn't do anything, that he would be blamed. And Mike Johnson's son is also in the military, and he doesn't want his family to have to fight. There was also another piece we found out that was important. Mike Johnson's father was a firefighter, and he gave a long interview, and he said, I want to be a firefighter like my dad. And we thought, that's interesting. So I called my friends at the State Emergency Services in Obolon, and I said, get me a helmet as soon as possible. And they said, Done. So about a week later, a box shows up in Washington, D.C., an enormous box, and it's a gold helmet. And it was a helmet that was used by a firefighter in Rivne. Has a huge hole in it, has the Ukrainian flag on one side, and an association of Ukrainian firefighters wrote a letter that said, "Dear Speaker Johnson, be like your father. Firefighters rush in, not out." So it was a lot of small interventions, but honestly, it was the grace of God. It was the providence of God that changed Mike Johnson's heart. There's no other explanation.
Amazing story. So creative, smart, and flexible approach. But can we have something towards Donald Trump's heart?
Absolutely.
Something,
Absolutely.
I don't know, except Melania Trump, because as you mentioned, she has a huge influence on him, but maybe something else.
So when I look at the team around Donald Trump, I am not encouraged from a Ukraine perspective, right? Yeah. I love General Kellogg. General Kellogg gets it. He comes here. He knows what's going on, but he's leaving.
He's leaving.
He's
yes.
leaving. But look, I learned, and I don't want to blow any smoke. I'm not. The picture is hard, but I learned from the supplemental fight with Mike Johnson that anything is possible. Politics is the art of the possible. We also used political technology. I mean, we did a lot of different things. We had phone calls coming into certain members of Congress. When you have a fight like this, you throw spaghetti at the wall. You try everything, and you don't know what's going to stick. So with President Trump, I do know a few things. I know that Melania is important, and Melania's two best friends are Ukrainian American. She follows the issue. She's from Eastern Europe. She is not naive. She knows what's going on, and she's talking to her husband. She cares deeply about the issue of the abduction of Ukrainian children. She follows it. She talks to Trump about it, and I think that's the wedge issue that will probably change their hearts. The second thing, though, that I find encouraging, Donald Trump hates war. Like, he genuinely does not like war, and he does want to end this. And I think his personality is also a benefit. He's not ideological. So he has the ability to do anything he wants. He can wake up tomorrow and he can pivot away from his previous positions. This is a positive thing. He can wake up tomorrow and he can say, I am sick and tired of Vladimir Putin. You think I'm weak? Let me show you. Let me show you who's boss. Will it happen? I don't know. It's a small play, but I think it's something that's possible. But when you look at the polling, there's two things that move the MAGA base. And it's the issue of the treatment of Russia has been torturing and persecuting Christians. That moves Christians and that moves Trump's base. And also the issue of the 10,000 children that have been abducted.
Melinda, you recently, just probably a few weeks ago, or maybe even less, presented your research regarding America and Ukrainian businesses together. I would say, I don't know how to put it perfectly. So, and it was a first systematic attempt to analyze our relation in that perspective. And you are saying that, so your report shows quite impressive numbers, 60 billion euros in annual revenue and 100,000 jobs thanks to Ukrainians. Could you please elaborate on that and why nobody have done such an amazing research before?
Natalie, thank you for noticing this article. It's not my research. So an amazing new group, a new startup called the ISE Group did this work. And it's a really good question. Why hasn't anyone studied the impact of Ukrainian and Ukrainian American businesses in America?
Yeah.
So this group said there's something missing here, right? Yeah. We're all looking for arguments about why Ukraine is important, why it matters. Ukraine is 5,000 miles away from the United States, right? That's a big distance. It's hard to answer people in Ohio, in Wyoming, in Alaska, where I'm from, why does this country matter so much to our own national interests? So here's one argument you can give MAGA voters, skeptical Republicans. It matters because Ukrainians are naturally born entrepreneurs. This is one of the most entrepreneurial-minded countries I've ever seen, and Ukrainians always start new businesses, and they do the same thing in America. So ISE Group measured this, and the annual revenue that Ukrainian American businesses is generating is estimated to be 60 billion with a B. That's a lot of money, and contribute to 300,000 jobs. And they're contributing to wages, they're contributing to federal taxes, state taxes, local taxes. The headline is this: Ukrainian Americans are fabulous immigrants. They help the American economy, and the more Ukrainians we can have, the better it is for the Ukrainian economy.
So basically, it shows that Ukrainians are not just, refugees who
No.
are seeking for help, but people who knows how to create, how to, start, as you said, a new business, a new life elsewhere. So I don't know. It just, I think for me, it's a very good sign. And I just really want this message to be delivered somewhere in Europe, in the United States, elsewhere, where people are complaining that their governments are paying a lot of money to Ukrainians.
So I encourage people to dig in and look at the numbers. This report was just done in the United States, but I've seen really dynamic numbers about the Czech Republic. Ukrainians are boosting the Czech Republic's. They're giving more than they're taking. Same thing in Poland. The Economist did a fabulous article about what Ukrainians are contributing to the Polish economy. They're opening massive amounts of small business and they're boosting the overall economic growth of Poland.
Melinda, what is the biggest stereotype about Ukraine and Ukrainians you would like to break?
Ukraine is not what you think it is. Open your mind, come here, be curious about Ukraine. So Ukraine has a lot of negative associations. You can find them here, but you can also find the most creative, fascinating place on earth. I love it because I like sociology, and this place is endlessly changing. The history is fascinating. The people are fascinating. The scientific education means you have an incredible mix of people. But this is a dynamic place, and the war is ultimately about people and about whether people have the ability to live their lives as they choose. And I don't know a more American story than that, or a story that should just appeal to people on the most basic level. People should be able to speak the language they choose, to worship God the way they want to worship God, to raise their children the way they want to, without worrying if they're going to wake up the next morning.
Yeah, I feel such a freedom here. So, Melinda, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for your time, for your insights. It was a great pleasure for me and honor.
Thank you.